Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I hope you enjoy our new set, our new table. Today we are joined by Kurt Hagman. He is the Republican floor leader in the California State Assembly. After we speak with Mr. Hagman, we'll be speaking with Baca. He is the sheriff for Los Angeles County. But I want to start with Mr. Hagman and talk about election 2012. I think it's fair to say it was not the best day for California Republicans.
No, we got we lost pretty much all the seats that we were planning for at that point.
And some more. I mean, there were probably about 5 seats that were in play. The California Republicans lost all 5 on the Assembly side, and then 2 others that no one expected would go Democratic.
Absolutely.
Sir, what happened?
Well, obviously, we're not communicating well. And I have a personal example of that. I went to 3 colleges in my district, and the first question I asked the students was, and I asked this my Kiwanis Club and Rotary Clubs, was how many people think we have less money this year than last year? And all the hands went up. And the truth is we've actually had more money in our general fund budget, not as much as we like to spend, so we increased 5% revenues, but we want to spend 17%, and therefore we have the budget crisis. But I think a combination of us not communicating well as Republicans, not being in touch with Californians, and seeing that exactly where it is, and getting our message out. And then one final thing I think was the Obama early call election. We saw the poll models from the day before the election. Really, people didn't turn out as much on the Republican side toward the evening.
But he got called at probably 10:45 on the East. I mean, there wasn't that much more time to vote. But there's one thing for the Republicans to have a tough day. I mean, this was a shellacking. There were, the Inland Empire had 3 competitive seats in the Congress, in the Senate, in the Assembly. They all went Democratic. I mean, these are regions that were traditionally Republican. You have Asian Americans who have been Republicans for decades, voting in larger numbers for Barack Obama than even Latinos. Asian Americans voting in very large numbers for Prop 30. I mean, this is the moment of truth for the California Republican Party.
We have to definitely take a hard look at it. We're not doing enough outreach. The demographics in California has definitely changed for that matter. And I think the top ticket really directs a lot of the local races as well, down ticket items.
And let's talk about the National Party, because I know a lot of you on the Republican side, bright, articulate, intelligent, not talking about rape and abortion, not talking about these issues that get a lot of play. I mean, the California Republican Party, in my perception, really has a very economic message. Yet it seems, in my perception, that it gets clouded by the national conversation, the national noise, rape, self-deportation, abortion. I mean, issues, we've never talked about those issues. How much is the California Republican brand being hurt by the noise of the national Republican brand?
Well, I think in every national election you have the coattails, either positive or negative, and I think you saw those negative coattails come to California. California is much more moderate in many ways than most other states. When you're a Republican or a Democrat, we may be a little more out there on the environmental side of things, but other issues are more pragmatic on both sides of the aisle, and I think it's more accentuated in the national scene based on their states and based on their population. And when you have a very contentious national race like we've had, where every night in the news you're watching the 2 candidates, you're watching the pundits on both sides spin things, that's what identifies the parties on the local level.
But let's talk about demography, as you mentioned. I mean, if you look at the Republican caucus, both on the Senate and the House, they look like us. I mean, there isn't a lot of diversity.
You're talking nationally.
No, locally. I mean, I can't think of many members of the California Republican Party in the Assembly or the Senate that don't look like us.
Well, we have 3 or 4 brand new candidates that we just brought up this election cycle.
I think you get my point. Is that, the Republican Party, part of the issue is that it doesn't look like the diversity that is America. And look, we're tribal people. I mean, humans are tribal. And so how do you play, and I don't mean that pejoratively, with the demography? How do you look at demography in a way where you can attract individuals of color?
We did have a lot of our 5 target seats. In fact, the ones that lost, we had
Matthew Lynn.
Matthew Lynn was
Tahishi, I mean,
we had
Rios.
We had all our
Bainey.
targets were the ethnic groups that you're reflecting to right now.
Maldonado. I mean,
Yeah.
they're all there. Van, I mean, they're all there.
They were there. They were the candidates. They were the ones who lost. They were moderate Republicans who did reflect the demographics of the state, and they did not succeed. So people are still.
It's the brand. I mean, I hate to be so bold.
No, I think what you're saying is true.
It's the brand somehow. And the irony to me is that you look at Mitt Romney, for example. I mean, I always had perceived him as a fairly moderate Republican. I mean, he invented Obamacare, let's face facts, you know, and yet he's the one that's talking about self-deportation and issues that just became just lightning rods, you know, in this community.
And I think with California, with the open primary, you see a little bit of the difference.
Right.
Now it's a little more of, sometimes we even went through the scenarios, what happens if you're a Dem versus Dem governor candidate in 2 years? You know, who's going to be going to the middle?
Could you?
And so,
I never thought of that.
So it's really changing the way our candidates are selected. That's why we did such a good recruitment job. We actually had good, moderate ethnic candidates in our races this year. But I think what you said at the beginning is that national race really clouded the down ticket.
So now you are in a minority that is a super minority.
Correct.
The Democrats control 2/3 of the Assembly, 2/3 of the House, of the Senate. No one expected the Democrats to control the Assembly in that way. How do you make yourselves relevant? I mean, as it is, you weren't in the room last year because the governor was just dealing with, because you didn't need a 2/3 to pass a budget. Now, I mean, how do you keep relevant?
Unfortunately, I don't know if things change. You know, I don't think change it too much different. They already had majority vote budget.
Right.
We already had super majorities in each committee to begin with, as far as bills getting out. Hopefully, you articulate your ideas. I think we take our message more to the public than we ever have before, and we keep, you know, saying, look, if this is such a good thing, you all voted for this. Why are we the second to last in unemployment, the highest in taxes, all these different kind of things?
People can say a lot of things about Willie Brown, but what he did do is he created a collegial environment, and he made Republicans relevant. I mean, he let Republicans shine, you know, if they had bills that could be supported. And it was about friendships, you know. Are you going to work at having beers with the Dems? Going out to dinner?
We've always done that. I've been very fortunate to get more bills out than the Republican up there because of that. I build friendships with my Democrat colleagues. And I think with these 12-year terms, I think you'll see more of that. We do have a brand new large class, 38 new members out of 80. But they are going to be there for 12 years. So you don't have to go shop a new seat every couple of years because it's open. You don't have to worry about having that perfect voting record to go back to your political base. You can sit there and hopefully work on some pragmatic ideas. And that's what we need. We need California to shine like it used to and get us out of the bottom of all these categories up to the top of these categories by being pragmatic. And I think we all bring different ideas and different experiences to the table that we can be that way.
On the flip side, one could argue the Republicans could just sit back and let the Democrats blow it. If you know what I'm saying. They rule the roost. Let them, you know, do what they want to do. They'll bungle it somehow.
Well, we gotta say they have done that in the last 2 years since they have been in power.
But this is different, though. I mean, they really rule the roost. I mean, they don't need a Republican vote for anything.
Nothing.
And so, couldn't one argue you just kind of sit back out golfing and let's see what they do?
You know, I think most of us wouldn't be here if we didn't think we had something to contribute and wanted things better. And we do want to work with our colleagues in the Democrat side and say, look, we do have some ideas, we do have some experiences.
So who are your friends on the Democratic side?
Oh, pretty much all of them. As a Republican floor leader, I have to work all the members on the floor.
But is there anyone that you're particularly tight with that, you know, like he or she's your go-to person? Or
I have several. My new counterpart, Tony Atkins, is the Democrat floor leader now.
I hear she's very
sharp, and we've already started that off before this election cycle.
She's from San Diego.
Yeah, and I have my new Speaker Pro Tem, the Speaker. Even though we bang heads.
Who's the new Speaker Pro Tem?
Nora Campos.
Campos.
Yes.
Who's from? No. She's from. No, not. Is she from this area?
Central.
Okay.
And then the Speaker, even though we bang heads a little bit because I'm the one who have to oppose a lot of things, we still get along very well.
I'm sure you do.
We do go out to dinner. We do have drinks on the side. So you have to. This is relationship business. You have to have relationships. Doesn't mean we compromise on our ideals or our visions. We still want to advocate for them, but we have to work together.
Of course. His name is Kurt Hagman. He is the Republican floor leader in the California State Assembly. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Lee Baca. He is the sheriff for Los Angeles County. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition. Welcome back to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Lee Baca, he is the sheriff for Los Angeles County. And sir, I want to speak with you about a program known as Secure Communities. It was put in place under the Bush administration. There have been some changes under the Obama administration. Before we get into those changes, what exactly is Secure Communities?
Simply this, with the mass influx of immigrants that are undocumented, there have been a number that have committed serious crimes, from murder all the way down, drug trafficking,
Sure.
Human trafficking, and the various felonies throughout the nation. We in the law enforcement community, the sheriffs, the police chiefs, we asked the federal government to take a more affirmative action on emptying the county jails and the state prisons of this type of an offender and deport them. So we got Secure Communities passed by the legislature, and it's working federally.
But let me ask you, on the deportation side, who was being deported under Secure Communities? Because that is where the controversy comes in, is were you deporting the violent criminal, or are you deporting someone who stole a chocolate bar?
There are three categories of deportation standards that ICE uses. Category 1 is for the serious offender, the violent offender, the big-time drug dealer, the cartel-type person, the kidnapping, human trafficking type person. Category 2 is for the serious felonies that are not necessarily violent. And then the lowest category, which is category 3, is for that misdemeanor person that is caught up in a local crime, as all these crimes are, and that individual may or may not be of a person that is, by ICE's standards, deportable.
And here's what's
but
interesting.
Could be.
So the Obama administration had indicated during the first term that they were really not interested in deporting these low-level offenders. They just didn't have the energy, the resources, the finances.
And that was true of the Bush administration as well, by the way.
But didn't the Obama administration make it more of a firm policy?
No. That's where the issue is with the civil rights advocates. They are still insisting that Secure Communities be vacated as a whole, but particularly the reason for it is that some of the college graduates, they get caught up in a drug driving arrest or a traffic violation that no ticket is paid, or driving without a driver's license. That's the DREAM Act issue. That's correct. That's the level that's under contention.
But let's talk about a recent decision or ruling, I'll call it, from Attorney General Kamala Harris of the state of California. What she had said, and it's a directive to state officials, of which you are as a county sheriff, that you don't need federal guidance if you want to change the way with which you enforce Secure Communities. Is that a fair recitation?
Yes. I was taking the position and had taken the position that I needed federal guidance from this issue, and she is saying, in effect, in her decision, that you don't need the federal guidance because these are voluntary programs as it stands, and she's absolutely correct. But we do have an agreement to have the serious and the more significant felonious offenders who are incarcerated in the LA County Jail enter into the Secure Communities program.
So what's the difference now in the wake of Kamala Harris's directive and your interpretation of her directive? Is there a change in policy?
There is a change in policy from the standpoint of a clarification that we in the local communities typically arrest people, put them in our station jails. If it's for a traffic violation or something minor, then they can be released from that jail. Now, when we're talking about the main central jail, we have never accepted a low-level misdemeanant in the county jail in a hold status. So it's really virtually very little change, if anything, no change.
But here's the flip side. If someone is here illegally, and we know they're here illegally because they've come into the system, maybe it's a minor offense, and you run a check through ICE and you see they're undocumented, why not deport them?
Simple. There are many people who come in as children with their families, ironically, and they in turn grow up in the educational system in America. They speak English, and they're not cultural Mexicans, they're more cultural Americans. And these are the people that you have to have some other degree of perspective on, because deport them to where? They may not speak Spanish or Chinese or whatever. Exactly. And so if you deport them back to their place of birth, there better be a clear infrastructure there for them to be accommodated by. On the other hand, have you found that Secure Communities has spooked immigrant communities because they're afraid if they have any interaction
with law enforcement, they could get their immigration status checked, and as a result, they're afraid. They had been afraid to interact.
There's certainly some validity to that perspective, that there's some fear, but in the LA County Sheriff's Department policing areas, we have a tremendous amount of programming with our youth centers and our various outreach programs, that there is no lack of cooperation and respect. It's really the people who have committed serious crimes who are causing all the controversy, and I believe it's still necessary to deport serious offenders and mid-level offenders and some low-level offenders.
You know what's interesting though? People may not realize, if you are convicted, let's say, of a drug trafficking offense, you get 10 years in jail, you're undocumented, you still serve your time in America, and then you get deported.
That's
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why don't we just get rid of them? I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but deport, let them.
What's fascinating about the whole process is even those that are deported, the serious offenders as well, they somehow find a way to get back in.
But even aside from that, we're paying for them to sit in our jails for 10 years. It's expensive.
We're paying a $500 million to incarcerate people in the county jail through the justice system here in Los Angeles County, just for undocumented. Now, when you get to the state prison system, I'm supposedly can estimate that it's several billions of dollars.
I know that's a debate between the feds and the state who should pay for incarcerating.
The feds should pay for all of it. You see, this has been my plea in the SCAP program. That's the state. SCAP is a state community assistance program, which is a funding mechanism to reimburse the counties. And we get reimbursed at about 8% of the real cost.
I know that Senator Dianne Feinstein has been trying to work to increase that percentage. This may be a harebrained idea. I think I mentioned it before. What if we built a prison on foreign soil in Mexico, Baja, enter into some type of treaty and let the felonious Mexican nationals who serve their time in Mexico?
Makes a lot of sense. It's just that in politics, it's difficult to do the right thing.
Harebrained idea, I'm sure. Let me ask you about what's known as the Trust Act. That was a law that passed through the California legislature that would have essentially prevented law enforcement from cooperating with the ICE in any form except for the most serious offenses. It passed, but Governor Brown vetoed it.
Right.
You supported that veto.
Yes.
But there is an effort to bring that back in the upcoming session. I don't believe you've taken a position on this modified bill, although we don't know what the bill is yet. Give us a sense of the Trust Act. It's a magnificent name, but what is it? Talk to us about it.
Well, I think it's something that we in law enforcement have to know exactly what this is all about, because we're the ones that are defined in the state law, the sheriffs in particular, the chief law enforcement officer of the county. Why are you making an effort to subjugate what is the input that law enforcement must have for what your political purposes are with the Trust Act? And my feeling about it is that let's see what they do. I don't think that it's the right thing to take away discretionary tools from local law enforcement.
In your mind, in light of Attorney General Harris's directive, do we even need the Trust Act anymore?
No, we truly don't, in my opinion, because you see, my interest is to protect the people of Los Angeles County. Now, let's just say a guy gets arrested for drunk driving, and we have no record in our local system of his other crimes, wherever they may be. But then we find out that the individual is a member of a drug cartel.
Right.
Well, guess what? We're going to want that person deported, even though the offense says drunk driving.
So can you make the reference under the current
Absolutely.
law as we
and
make
so
today?
The Trust Act tells me that you're going to
wouldn't have been able to.
You're going to eliminate discretion.
I understand. Okay, his name is Lee Baca. He is the sheriff for Los Angeles County. I thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition. When we come back, we're going to be speaking with a member of the school board in Hacienda-La Puente's Unified School District. His name is Chen. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back. Welcome back to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Jay Chen, he is the new president of the Hacienda-La Puente Unified School Board. Congratulations on your election.
Thank you, Brad.
And I want to speak with you, sir, about Prop 30. That was the initiative that passed in November, and it increases sales tax by 1/4 cent for 4 years, taxes on the wealthy for 7 years. Jay, I never thought it'd pass. I never did.
Yeah, but you know, it was a huge victory, and a lot of that credit goes to the teachers and a lot of the unions put in a lot of effort to get it passed.
They did. And what about Jerry Brown, the governor?
Jerry Brown did an amazing job, and I think the public really had a lot of faith in Jerry Brown and what he was. When he was talking about, you know, the ramifications of it not getting passed, we believed.
So let's talk about it. Now that it's passed, what happens for public schools, and what would have happened if it didn't pass?
So now that it's passed, a lot of these trigger cuts that were going to happen, now we can avoid those. So it's not that we're getting more money, we're just not getting cut as much as we were before. But our schools are still facing deferrals, monies that are supposed to be coming in, they get pushed off for months.
And so that's the question. What this does, it seems to me, is it stops the bleeding,
Right.
but you're not getting new pints of blood.
No.
So what do you do to deal with the last 4 years of what some have argued are very draconian cuts?
You know, in our school district, what we're trying to do is build up our reserves. We've seen this happening all the way, you know, from the very beginning, and so we've built up very healthy reserves. We're at about over $30 million for our school district.
Wow.
Which sounds like a lot.
Should you start spending some of that money?
We actually are. So because Prop 30 passed, we were able to give our first raises to our employees for the first time in about 5-6 years.
Now, I recently spoke with Senator Carol Liu, and we spoke about Prop 13 and the potential reform of Prop 13. For example, Senator Leno is proposing changing the formula whereby a locality can pass a parcel tax for the purpose of schools, decreasing the percentage from 66 2/3 to 55%. What do you think, as the president of the school board, about that proposal?
I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, a 2/3 majority vote is very difficult to come by. And I think 55% makes a lot more sense. It's higher than a simple majority, but it's much more feasible.
And at this stage, as I understand it, in the year 2000, the voters did allow 55% majority for traditional school bonds. Has Hacienda-La Puente taken advantage of that? Do you have school bonds in place, for example?
We're just finishing up our last bond, which was put in place about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And once this is finished, we're going to take a look at possibly going back out for another bond. But we have to make sure that this first bond is wrapped up completely. We did a good job so that the public will entrust us again with another modernization project.
If we can, I want to speak about the recent election on a couple of issues. You were the Democratic, well, you were a candidate for U.S. Congress. I guess that you're not a Democratic candidate because it's the top 2 vote getters. In the end, you were not successful for a congressional seat. But it was quite an election overall in terms of voter turnout. And I want to speak specifically about Asian American voters. You are a member of that community, a Taiwanese American. I think it's fair to say that Asian American voters have changed in ways no one ever expected. I think in 1992, Bill Clinton took about 30% of the Asian American vote. Barack Obama, 20 years later, took over 70% of the Asian American vote.
Right.
Why are Asian Americans swinging so wildly towards the Democratic Party?
I think a lot of it has to do with the candidate, President Barack Obama, who many people would say is the first Asian American president.
What do you mean?
Well, first of all, you know, he spent his childhood in Indonesia.
That's true, which people have hammered him on, but still, you're
there's
right.
that connection that he understands Asia. Also, he was born in Hawaii, which some people dispute.
But I didn't put that together.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, he does have ties to Asia, unlike any other presidential candidate.
And if you were to visit Hawaii, I mean, it is 40–50% Asian.
Right.
And the other thing is, many people don't know this, but his brother-in-law, Conrad Ng, is a Chinese Canadian. I think he's from Canada. But if you looked at the stage, the first family, there's a Chinese face up there.
Right. So there's no doubt there are strong connections. What about the fact that he happens to be of color himself? I mean, how does that play in your mind with Asian American voters?
I think that definitely helped him.
Right.
I think all of us as minorities, we understand what it means to be a minority, and so we understand the struggles of other minorities. And when we see an African American, I think we see that if he can get elected, that opens doors for other minorities as well.
And what's also interesting is that even though the immigration debate is so focused on Latinos and Latino voters, the reality is there are plenty of Asians moving into this country, documented or undocumented. And so I would presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the immigration debate is important to Asian Americans.
Oh, very much so. And as you mentioned, very often the Asian experience is kind of left out. But if you were to take a look at this election and the president's margin of victory, a full 1/3 of that could be attributed to the huge margin he took with the Asian community.
No, there's no doubt about it. I also must mention that even though you were not successful in your race for Congress, there will be 12 Asian Americans in Congress in 2013, the new Congress, the highest number ever. How does that make you feel?
I'm very proud. I'm very proud to see a lot of the people that I fought with during this campaign. Now I'm on their Facebook feeds. And these are people that I saw, I hung out with, and now they're going to be making decisions on behalf of the American people. And I think what it shows is how great it is that just anybody in the United States can choose to run and be a representative.
And what's so interesting is two of those new members, Mark Takano, who is a Japanese American, and Ami Bera, who's an Indian American, I think it's fair to say neither of them are representing Asian districts.
No.
I mean, Mark Takano's in Riverside. I mean, that is not an area that is known for high Asian American populations.
Yes.
So what does that say to you that Asian Americans are not necessarily having to win in areas where there are large Asian American voters?
I think it's great. It's a great sign that we can expand beyond what we think might be our traditional base. And it shows that everyone is ready for a qualified candidate regardless of their race or their ethnicity. I think it's very promising.
And I would be remiss if I did not mention that Mark Takano, not only is he an Asian American, but he identifies himself as a gay man.
Yes.
And so I believe he may be the first gay of color to serve in Congress. Is that right?
He is.
And not only that, he's from Riverside. I mean, on so many levels, it really does talk about the changing face of California.
Right. And I think California is the vanguard of that new, the tolerance that we're seeing. That should hopefully spread.
At the same time, I want to talk about your race.
Yes.
Because your community, that congressional district, did have a large number of Asian American voters, but turnout not as high as you would have expected.
Right.
Talk to me about how even though Asian American voters are turning out in greater numbers than they had, and they are trending more Democratic, they're still not participating pursuant to their population.
Yeah, so one of the issues we have is the Asian community is still very young. Many of them are still immigrants, so they don't register in the same numbers as other communities. And once they do get registered, they're not voting at the same rates.
Why? Is it that many maybe come from dictatorial governments from China, and so they just don't want to get involved in government and politics?
Yeah.
Is it language barriers? What is it?
I think it's both. Language barriers are a huge issue. For example, the Korean community is very large in our district. They're also one of the most linguistically isolated.
Really?
In the United States. The first most isolated, I believe, is the Cambodian community.
Right.
And so when I would go precinct walking, they simply wouldn't open the door because there was that language barrier. So it was very hard to reach out to them.
And what was most remarkable about the Obama victory and his tremendous success amongst Asian Americans is I believe that he was really the first presidential candidate to micro-target Asian Americans. I mean, he had messages for Vietnamese voters, Cambodian voters, Chinese voters, Korean voters, Japanese voters. I mean, it really looking at each community and their individual languages, their individual hopes, dreams, and desires.
Right.
Did you see that? I mean, you were campaigning at the same time he was.
Yes, I definitely saw that. One of my friends was actually part of the Asian American outreach team. So I knew that they took that very seriously. They were really micro-targeting.
So now that you're president of your school board, what's next?
Well, I've got 3 years on the school board. I want to make sure that during these still uncertain fiscal times, we're guiding the ship in the right way.
Okay, his name is Chen. He is the president of the Hacienda-La Puente Unified School Board. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.